Chapter 132, The Symphony. It was a clear, steel-blue day. The firmaments of air and sea were hardly separated that are hardly separable in that all-pervading azure. Only the pensive air was transparently pure and soft with a woman's look, and the robust and manlike sea heaved with long, strong, lingering swells, as Samson's chest in his sleep. Hither and thither on high glided the snow-white wings of small speckled birds. These were the gentle thoughts of a feminine air, but to and fro in the deeps, far down in the bottomless blue, rushed mighty leviathans, swordfish, and sharks, and these were the strong, troubled, murderous thinkings of the masculine sea. But though thus contrasting within, the contrast was only in shades and shadows without. Those two seemed one. It was only the sex, as it were, that distinguished them. Alive, like a royal czar and king, the sun seemed giving this gentle air to this bold and rolling sea, even as bride to groom. And at the girdling line of the horizon, a soft and tremulous motion, most seen here at the equator, noted the fond, throbbing thrusts, the loving alarms, with which the poor bride gave her bosom away. Tied up and twisted, gnarled and knotted with wrinkles, haggardly firm and unyielding, his eyes glowing like coals that still glow in the ashes of ruin, untottering Ahab stood forth in the cleanness of the morn, lifting his splintered helmet of a brow to the fair girl's forehead of heaven. Oh, immortal infancy and innocence of azure, invisible winged creatures that frolic all round us, sweet childhood of air and sky, how oblivious were ye of old Ahab's close-coiled woe. But so I have seen little Miriam and Martha, laughing-eyed elves, heedlessly gambol around their old sire, sporting with the circle of singed locks which grew on the mange of that burnt-out crater of his brain. Slowly crossing the deck from the scuttle, Ahab leaned over the side and watched how his shadow in the water sank and sank to his gaze. The more and more that he strove to pierce the profundity, but the lovely aromas in the enchanted air did at last seem to dispel, for a moment, the cantankerous thing in his soul. That glad, happy air, that winsome sky, did at last stroke and caress him, the stepmother world, so long cruel, forbidding, now threw affectionate arms around his stubborn neck, and did seem joyously sob over him, as if over one, that however wilful and erring, she could not yet find in her heart to save and bless. From behind his slouched hat Ahab dropped a tear into the sea, nor did all the Pacific contain such wealth as that one wee drop. Starbuck saw the old man, saw him, how he heavily leaned over the side, and he seemed to hear in his own true heart the measureless sobbings that stole out of the center of the serenity around. Careful not to touch him or to be noticed by him, yet he drew near to him and stood there. Ahab turned. "Starbuck, sir." "Oh, Starbuck, it is a mild, mild wind and a mild-looking sky. On such a day, very much as a sweetness as this, I struck my first whale, a boy harpooner of 18, 40 years ago. 40 years of continual whaling, 40 years of privation in the peril and the storm time, 40 years on the pitiless sea. For 40 years Ahab has forsaken the peaceful land, for 40 years to make war on the horrors of the deep. Aye, and yes, Starbuck, out of those 40 years I have not spent 3 ashore. When I think of this life I have led, the desolation of solitude it has been, the masoned-walled town of a captain's exclusiveness, which admits but a small entrance to any sympathy from the green country without. Oh, weariness, heaviness, Guinea Coast slavery of solitary command. When I think of this all half suspected, not so keenly known to me before, and how for 40 years I have fed upon dry, salted fare, fit emblem of the dry nourishment of my soil, when the poorest landsman has had fresh fruit in his daily hand and broken the world's fresh bread to my moldy crusts. Away, whole oceans away, from that young girl wife I wedded past 50, and sailed for Cape Horn the next day, leaving but one dent in my marriage pillow. Wife, rather a widow with her poor husband alive. I widowed that pearl girl when I married her, Starbuck, And then the madness, the frenzy, the boiling blood, and the smoking brow, with which for 1,000 lowerings old Ahab has furiously, foamingly chased his prey, more a demon than a man. Ay, ay, what 40 years old fool Ahab has been. Why this strife of the chase? Why weary and palsy the arm at the oar and the iron and the lance? How richer or better is Ahab now? Behold, O Starbuck, it is not hard with this weary load I bear. One poor leg should I have been snatched from under me. Here, brush this old hair aside, it blinds me. I seem to weep. Locks so gray did never grow, but from out of some ashes. But do I look very old, so very, very old, Starbuck? I feel deadly faint, bowed and humped as though I were Adam staggering beneath the piled centuries since paradise. God, 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 crack my heart, stave my brain, mockery, mockery, bitter, biting mockery of gray hairs. Have I lived enough joy to wear ye, and seem and feel thus intolerably old? Close, stand close to me, Starbuck, and let me look into a human eye. It is better than to gaze into the sea or sky, better than to gaze upon God. By the green land, by the bright hearthstone, this is the magic glass, man. I see my wife and my child in thine eye. No, no, stay on board, on board. Lower not when I do, when branded Ahab gives chase to Moby Dick. That hazard should not be thine. No, no, not with that far-away home I see in that eye. O captain, my captain, noble soul, grand old heart, after all, why should anyone give chase to that hated fish? Away with me, let us fly these deadly waters, let us home. Wife and child too are Starbuck's. Wife and child of his brotherly, sisterly playfellow of youth, even as thine, sir, are the wife and child of thy loving, longing, paternal old age. Away, let us away. This instant, let me alter the course. How cheerily, how hilariously, O my captain, would we bowl on our way to see old Nantucket again. I think, sir, they have some such mild blue days even as this in Nantucket. They have, I've seen them. Some summer days in the morning, about this time. Yes, it is noon nap now. The boy vivaciously wakes, sits up in bed, and his mother tells him of me, of cannibal old me, how I am abroad upon the deep, but will yet come back to dance him again. 'Tis my Mary herself. She promised that my boy every morning should be carried to the hill to catch the first glimpse of his father's sail. Yes, yes, no more, it is done. We head for Nantucket. Come, my captain, steady our course, let us away. See the boy's face from the hill, the boy's hand on the hill. But Ahab's glance was averted. Like a blighted fruit tree, he shook and cast his last cindered apple to the soil. What is it? What nameless, inscrutable, unearthly thing is it? What cozening, hidden lord and master and cruel, remorseless emperor commands me? That against all natural lovings and longings I so keep pushing and crowding and jamming myself on all the time, recklessly making me ready to do what I in my own proper natural heart I durst not so much as dare. Excellent. Is Ahab, is it I, God, or who that lifts this arm? But if the great sun move not of himself, but it is an errand boy in the heaven, nor one single star can revolve, but by some invisible power, how then can this one small heart beat, this one small brain think thoughts, unless God does that beating, does that thinking, does that living, and not I? By heaven, man, we are turned round and round in this world like yonder windlass, and fate is at the handspike. All the time, lo, that smiling sky and this unsounded sea. Look, see ye albacore, who put into him the chase and fang and flying fish. Where do murderers go, man? Who's to doom when the judge himself is dragged to the bar? But it is mild, mild wind and a mild-looking sky, and the air smells now. As if it blew from the faraway meadow they have been making hay somewhere under the slopes of the Andes, Starbuck, and the mowers are sleeping among the new-mown hay. Sleeping? Aye, toil we how we may, we all sleep at last on the field. Sleep, aye, and rust amid the greenness, and last year's sighs flung down and left in the half-cut swaths, Starbuck. But blanched to a corpse's hue with despair, the mate had stolen away. Ahab crossed the deck to gaze over to the other side. but started at two reflected fixed eyes in the water there. Fadala was motionlessly leaning over the same rail. So this is the end of chapter 132. And Ahab is beginning to have his doubts. He's seeing this bright, beautiful day, and he's seeing the sea and the sky being the same color. And this is something that happens. It's really kind of weird to see where you have the sky just this clear blue and the sea a clear blue. In the Pacific, the sea is more often clear, but many times I've seen like the Atlantic where the sky is gray and the sea is gray. But in this case, they're both this bright azure blue. It's a bright sky blue. And, that happens out in the Pacific. And as I said, up in Nantucket, it's probably more likely that the sea is gray and the sky is gray. So Ahab is looking at this, and he's thinking about his home, and he's thinking about his wife. And he's thinking about how he's been wailing for 40 years, married for 8, and he's only really spent time with his wife a little bit, because it says that right after he married her, like the next day, he married her, and then the next day he shipped out. So he's missing his wife, he's missing his child. And Starbuck tries to use this to convince him. He says, I'm missing my kid too. I'm missing my wife too. It is time for us, we can just turn around and we can go home now. We don't have to go after Moby Dick. And then Ahab is like, this is fate, this is destiny. This is not my will. I am just being turned by this. And this is fate and this is destiny, that this is something that I need to do. And now you have him crossing over the deck to the other rail. And there's Fadala. Now here you have this kind of contrast between Fadala and Starbuck, where Fadala has in many ways been cast as sort of an evil figure. And, is kind of a demon and all sorts of things like that, which is kind of racist, but, he's being sort of cast as an evil. And here we have the comparison of Starbuck. So we have Starbuck who's saying, look, you miss your family, I miss my family too. It's a good thing for us to go home. And Ahab is like, no, I can't do this. This is fate. I have no control. This is something I have to do. And he's thinking of the harvest, and he's thinking of the end of the harvest and just things lying done. And he's crossing over to look at the other side of things. So he has set his face towards going after Moby Dick. He's turned his back literally on his family, and he is setting out to do this.